Okay, good afternoon. It is April 30th at 2 o'clock, so I am going to be going over chapters 21 and chapters 22 of To Kill a Mockingbird. I'll also briefly go over your assignment for the week. Instead of giving you a quiz over chapters 21 and 22, I'm going to assign you a comic strip, and I will explain the program that you guys will be using as soon as I'm done explaining chapters 21 and 22. You can pick whichever chapter that you want to use for your summary. You don't have to do both chapters 21 and 22. You can pick whichever you think is easier to turn into a comic. So we're going to do two chapters today. The reasoning for that is chapters 21 and 22 are both fairly short. Also, I want to make sure we get through the entire novel before the end of the school year. So I'll probably begin doing two chapters each session from now on. So chapter 21. Chapter 21 is the chapter where we find out who won the court case. The chapter begins with the children being caught. No one was aware of exactly where they were sitting other than a few people. Mr. Underwood, the court reporter, actually kind of tells Atticus that the children are upstairs with the African American population. It is kind of telling that he doesn't tell Atticus until after Calpurnia interrupts the trial to inform Atticus that the children are missing. Hey, what's going on, Malachi? Welcome. I just started. I'm going to go over chapters 21 and 22 today, and then I'm going to go over an assignment in which you guys get to make a comic book. You're going to take either chapter 21 or chapter 22 and put it in comic book form, and I'll explain that as soon as I go over chapters 21 and 22. So it's good to see you on. The most important... Oh, hey, Elijah, look at you guys filing in. I'll make sure to give you guys credit for being here today. So I'm not sure what chapter of the novel you guys are up to. I'm going to be going over 21 and 22. On the Google Classroom site, there are summaries for basically every chapter that I've covered since school has let out. There's also a link for the play version, so you can always watch that. And there's a link to the audiobooks and the text versions of each chapter as well as quizzes for pretty much every chapter. This week's does not have a chapter quiz. Instead, you just are going to summarize one of the chapters in comic book form, and I'll explain that at the end. So anyways, back to chapter 21. Chapter 21 begins with the children being caught. So Calpurnia interrupts the trial, which is kind of a big deal because the last time someone interrupted, the judge kind of flipped out on Link D's when he interrupted to mention that Tom was actually a very good person and people should take his word for it that he wasn't involved with Mayella. But Calpurnia does not get yelled at. Atticus is kind of exhausted when he talks to the children. He's upset that they're there, sort of, but he looks more tired than angry. Calpurnia actually looks mad, probably because she had to go out and look for them. Also because Atticus is under a lot of pressure and Calpurnia doesn't want the children putting more pressure on him. Jem voices his belief that Atticus won, so he doesn't even really seem concerned that he was caught at this point. He just is more excited the fact that they've probably won the case. Atticus doesn't seem to share his excitement. Jem's usage of we, though, kind of the way that people who root for a specific team will say we won or we lost or we are going to do well today, kind of suggests that he's taken a level of ownership in his father's case. It also demonstrates his attachment and love towards his father. Atticus agrees to let the kids watch the ending of the trial, but he tells them they need to go home first and eat, suggesting he thinks it's going to take a while for the jury to come back with their verdict. From today's standards, we would probably assume they would come back with a not guilty very quickly, but as Reverend Sykes mentioned before, he's never seen a jury take the word of a black man over a white man. And since this kind of boils down to Mayella and Mr. Yule accusing Tom and Tom saying he didn't do it, even though the evidence suggests that Tom's innocent, even though there's no medical evidence, it still is going to be difficult for a white jury in the 1930s in the South to acquit a black person. So, should the children have watched the trial, yay or nay? What were the positives? What were the negatives? It looks as though Atticus wasn't aware that they were there. However, in previous chapters, he's made a point to pretend that he doesn't know the children are paying attention when he's teaching a lesson. So it's possible he was aware that they were there the entire time. He definitely knew that they were interested in the trial. Jem was very protective over him, and so was Scout when the mob came to attack him, or to at least get him out of the way so they could attack Tom. So it's reasonable to assume that he knew they were there, even though he kind of acts like he didn't know. So why would they benefit from being at the trial? Well, for one, they would see the world the way it actually is. Two, they would see their father standing up for what was right. They will see bravery in action, and not just from Atticus, also from Tom. Tom is probably very frightened, but he's still demonstrating a level of bravery standing up to these charges. Miss Maudie's refusal to go to the trial shows a level of bravery. She's kind of voicing her dissent by not showing up at the trial. Hey, Brian, I just noticed you were there. Going over the reasons why and why not, reasons for and for not the children going to the trial. Like, what were the benefits and what were the negatives of the children witnessing the trial. Also, they get to see Lincoln Dees stand up to basically the entire courtroom and tell them that Tom's actually a good person. He gets yelled at and he gets kind of publicly shamed for this, but that also took a level of bravery. So they see bravery firsthand. Negatives for why the children probably shouldn't have been to the trial. This might make them be less safe or feel less safe in their town. Their town's up to this point always been seen as a very safe place. However, now they're witnessing a level of like hatred and cruelty that they really haven't been exposed to before. Also, they hear graphic details of rape. Remember, Scout's only 9 years old, so there were a lot of adults who voiced their opinion that Scout probably shouldn't have been in the room when that was gone over. Also, they could develop negative opinions of their neighbors. They live by these people, and now they're seeing some very ugly events and some people speaking in very ugly ways. And they still have to, go to school with the children of these people. They still have to interact with these people in their daily life. There's also very interesting interaction between Reverend Sykes and Jim. It's really short. Jim talks about how they've won, suggesting even extending this ownership of the trial to the African American community, to himself, to Atticus, kind of like they're on the same side. Sykes mentions that he's never seen a jury take the word of a white man over, or the word of a black man over a white man. But Jim kind of disregards this, suggesting that things are fair, and because the judicial system's fair, Atticus has proved Tom's innocent, so Tom's going to be found not guilty. So he kind of has this like view of fairness and right and wrong, and he's not able to get his mind around the fact that Tom might still be found guilty. The verdict, however, Scout notices that when the jury comes back in the room, they don't look at Tom. And she remembers that Atticus mentioned before that if a jury does not look at the defendant, it's a very bad sign. So Tom's found guilty. Tom's found guilty, and Atticus appears as though he was aware that they were likely to convict Tom. He had mentioned this previously. Dolphus Raymond seemed as though he wanted the kids to go back into the courtroom to see the unfairness, so they would see the world for the way it was. Also, remember Atticus earlier mentioned his definition of bravery was knowing that you couldn't win but trying anyways. So Atticus kind of personifies this. He knew he probably couldn't win. He tried anyways. He tried his best. And there was probably some value in allowing the children to see an unfair trial play out. The reaction to the verdict. Reverend Sykes and the African American population, who remember are all in the balcony, all stand up as Atticus leaves. Atticus leaves by walking straight down the center. Scout mentions in the chapter that typically he kind of lingers around the courtroom and leaves the long way out. This time he just leaves as quickly as possible. He says a few things to Tom before he leaves, probably words of encouragement, but then he just leaves. He looks exhausted as he's leaving, and he doesn't look to be in a great mood. This has definitely taken kind of a toll on him as a person to try to help someone and to deal with all the ugliness of the racism, the repercussions, and to be a part of something that he believes in, the justice system, and have it fail him probably really takes a toll on him. But so as he leaves, the African Americans stand up, trying to show a level of respect and gratitude for his at least attempt to do the right thing. So that's chapter 21. It's fairly short. Chapter 22 is also fairly short, and chapter 22 deals with the aftermath. So immediately after the trial, Atticus and Jem have a conversation. By the time he leaves the courtroom, Atticus seems as though he's kind of buried his feelings. He's straightened up his clothes, he's tightened his tie, and he's basically buried it by that point. So when Jem starts crying, Atticus has already buried that, and he even makes mention of the fact that, like, things have been unfair for a long time. They're probably going to continue to be unfair. We can try to change those things, but only children cry over these type of things. Jem cries, and it kind of mirrors Dill's reaction. Dill cried more over the unfairness, or the meanness rather. He was upset about how mean people were treating Tom, whereas Jem seems to be more concerned with the lack of fairness. So they're both very similar, but Jem only breaks down when they actually lose, and Dill gets upset just because of the cruelty that he can't seem to deal with. Scout doesn't really voice her emotional, the way she was affected emotionally one way or the other. She kind of like is a witness. She views Atticus's reaction. She views Dill's reaction. She views Jem's reaction. She doesn't really like judge any of them for the reaction, though. She's kind of emotionless here and detached. Atticus mentions that he's not actually bitter, that it's important that the children don't become bitter over this. He also suggests that he is tired, though he's exhausted. He probably spent a lot of energy trying to defend Tom, but he lost and he's just exhausted at this point. He does suggest that he thinks he'll win an appeal. The appeals will be with judges instead of with juries, and he thinks he has a good chance using the appeals to eventually get the conviction overturned and have Tom released. The reaction by the African American community is pretty telling. Most of the African Americans in town drop food off for Atticus. So when he wakes up in the morning, there's all this freshly prepared food. Tom's father dropped off an entire chicken. Someone dropped off rolls. It's basically just this huge feast, and this is just the people's way of saying thank you to Atticus. Remember, it's the Great Depression, so food's scarce. A lot of people are struggling just to survive, so the fact that these people are able to just drop off like large amounts of food is very generous. Atticus is very thankful for this, but he asks Calpurnia rather to thank everyone for him, but tell them not to do this again. Food's just too precious during the Depression. He doesn't want to see people hurt themselves just to say thank you to him. The townspeople's reaction, so specifically the white townspeople, Dill mentions that Stephanie Crawford says if a man like Atticus wants to butt his head against a stone wall, that's his business, suggesting that a lot of the townspeople view what Atticus did for Tom as being kind of meaningless. He's just one person. Who was he to think that he could change the entire structure of society? So they kind of view his effort as kind of meaningless, like hopeless, right? Like the same odds I would have for breaking down a stone wall with my head are the same odds they're giving Atticus for helping Tom. Like, it's something he just can't do. He probably thinks he's better than he is if he thought he could change things. A large group of the white people also, remember, before the trial suggested that Atticus was wrong for even trying. So it's kind of like whether he's wrong because they agree with racism, or Atticus is wrong because he's trying to do too much all at once. And that's kind of left up for you to decide. Miss Maudie kind of rescues the children while they're outside listening to Miss Crawford. Miss Maudie calls them over. She baked them cakes. She baked a small cake for Dill and Scout and a larger cake for Jem as a way to bolster their feelings. And that's kind of just who Miss Maudie is. She's kind of like this nice grandmotherly type, so she knows the kids were through something rough yesterday, and now she's trying to like bolster their feelings. There's an interaction here between Jem and Miss Maudie that's pretty telling. She mentions the fact that normally the court-appointed defendant would not have gone to Atticus. Atticus has been a lawyer for long enough that these types of trials would typically go to the newest person on the bar, so the youngest attorney. And Atticus took this case when he probably shouldn't have. So the judge suggesting that Atticus take this case, Atticus actually running through this case, kind of shows that the judge was trying to give Tom as good of a chance as possible. Also, even though he didn't win, Atticus managed to keep the jury deliberating late into the night. I think the kids left the courtroom around 8 o'clock, and then the jury doesn't come back until well after 11. So they actually spent some time discussing this. So it wasn't as though they all just decided, hey, he's black, so he's guilty. There was actually some discussion. So even though the verdict was definitely unfair, there was at least some discussion of releasing Tom and finding him not guilty. Miss Maudie suggests that things maybe are in fact changing, just slowly. Another important interaction here, Dill mentions that he wants to be a clown when he grows up. Right here, he's voicing how he doesn't want to be around meanness anymore. He wants to be happy all the time, and he kind of views clowns as being happy and bringing joy, so that's what he wants to be when he grows up. When Jem suggests that clowns are actually sad and people just laugh at them, Dill replies that he'll be a new type of clown then, and he'll make fun of everybody else. He'll laugh at all the evil people. He kind of refers to some of the townspeople as needing brooms, kind of like a reference to a witch, that they're all kind of like evil or wicked somehow, and that he wants to laugh at them and kind of make fun of how wrong and evil and cruel that they are. So his critique's kind of naive, but it's also very accurate. If you've noticed throughout the story, especially his aunt, Miss Stephanie Crawford, seems to take a level of joy in pointing out all the things that people have done wrong, almost as if she's gaining stature from pointing out how other people are failing at life. So his critique is kind of naive, but it's also fairly accurate. The last thing that happens in this chapter, after Miss Maudie kind of lets the children go and the children are just talking, Miss Stephanie Crawford comes up the sidewalk, and she seems excited to tell Dill and the other children that Mr. Yule spit on Atticus and threatened to get him. So they bumped into each other in town. Mr. Yule knows where Atticus works, so he's able to find him. And we don't know all the details yet. We'll find those out next chapter. But Mr. Yule just spits in his face and then threatens to get him. Miss Maudie seems as though she's also aware that this happened. And just as Miss Crawford's telling the children about this, she comes on to her porch to call the children to her, but she was too late. It appears as though she was trying to shield them from hearing this information from Miss Crawford, who's going to kind of say it in kind of this cruel way, almost to get their reaction. Whereas Miss Maudie would have been trying to kind of protect them from the harshness of what just happened to their father. And you will find out more details about this in the next chapter, and we'll go over that, on Tuesday. What I want to go over now, though, firstly, I put the summaries for these two chapters already on Google Classrooms. Secondly, I put the answers to Week 2's Language Arts section of your packet on there as well. So, on your packet, it's broken up into weeks. There's 7 weeks, I believe. Week 2, this would be the portion of the packet that looks like this. So it would say week 2 Monday, week 2 Tuesday, all the way up to Friday. You don't have to do Friday's writing portion. You only have to do the reading portion. So it looks really long for Friday, but since you're only actually using the reading portion, it won't take you as long as it looks. And the answers to this are all on Google Classrooms under Packet 2 Answers. The big activity, and the reason I kind of went quickly through chapters 21 and 22, your activity is going to be to create a comic book. So when you click on the Create a Comic link, you will see a comic login link and a student join page link. The comic login link will have each of your names, and it will have a number after it, and that's what you will use to log into the website. So all you need to do is click on to the student join page link and then type in your password. It should end up looking something like this. When you click on the link, type in your name and password there. It will bring up the ability to create a comic book at that point. I had 7th grade do this earlier. They did it for superheroes. They had this assigned on Tuesday. You're actually going to use it to summarize either chapter 21 or chapter 22. So take the key points of chapter 21 or chapter 22. I think 22 is probably going to be the easier one to create a comic for, and just basically summarize what happened. You don't have to do an incredibly long comic book to get a good grade on this. I would expect probably 6 panels, but you could do as many as 9. This is an example of Ethaniel's from 7th grade, and they were assigned to create a comic book about a superhero. So if you look through what he did here, he has like a character, he explains what the problem is. In this case, it's he has a power to turn invisible and to teleport, and he wants to fight crime, and he finds out from watching the television that his uncle has committed a bank robbery. So you get like a nice little internal-external conflict where the robbery is your external conflict, so him against his uncle, and then the internal conflict of he cares about the person who committed the crime, so there's kind of like a struggle within himself about wanting to stop his uncle and trying to convince him to give it back. When that eventually fails, he ends up, I believe, teleporting him to the police station, and while turning invisible, forcing him to admit to what he did. So you have like a whole little story here. In Nathaniel's case, yours instead is going to be a summary. So what we're going to do, I'm going to log in as one of you guys. I'll pick someone who's not here. So let's just log in with Muhammad's login. Just use that as an example here. So I'm going to copy and paste that right there. Whoa, seems as though maybe I misspelled something. So instead, let's use Marcellus's. What is going on here? Oh, you know why that's not working? I think that is the link for the 7th grade, so I should probably re-log in. Alright, now it should work. Okay, that's what the problem was. So when you log in, it will have you make your avatar. And this is just you, so you're the only person who's going to actually see this. You can kind of just go through this whole thing real quick. So it doesn't really matter which you click here. Just kind of make it look like yourself, make it look like someone completely different. That's up to you. Once you go through the entire thing, I'm just kind of clicking the first option for every single option here. And then you can give them a weird facial expression if you want, whatever outfit you want. I think you can skip that. You can give them a cool pose if you feel like it. But I kind of tried to make my guy look more like me. But once you've created your avatar, what you're going to do is you're going to write summary, chapter, and then either 21 or 22. I think 22 is probably the shorter one. So that's the one that I would suggest you guys do. But if you think chapter 21, for whatever reason, will be easier or is a better representation of your abilities, of course, feel free to use that. Luckily for the backgrounds, there actually is a courtroom background. So if you wanted to do chapter 21, you could of course do that. There are only so many backgrounds you can click. If you notice, they have a locked sign that means those are locked and you'd have to pay to get those. So don't worry about those. If you guys and the 7th graders ended up liking this template, this might be something that we could use for next year, and I could probably request that we get some of the other pictures unlocked. But for now, you just kind of have to use what you got. So you can make as many panels as you want. When you click on a panel that you want to design, you click characters. See the little purple tab up top? And then you can make as many of these people as you want. So if you wanted to make, say, a scout character, and then that seems to be about what Scout would wear, then you can create another character, add other characters, add a dill, add a, I didn't want to put him up there, but you can move him around also. So where it says when you edit the character, you can change their focus, and that will change where they're at. So if I wanted to move Dill or Scout, however I want to move them around, I can do that. If you want to make someone talk, you simply go to the Words tab up top and you click the Add Words button, and then type blah blah for an example here. But you can have them say whatever you want. And since you're trying to summarize either chapters 21 or chapter 22, you want to try to capture the gist of what happened. So in chapter 22, the gist of this, you would want a conversation between Jem and Atticus, where Jem's telling Atticus that he thinks that they're going to win. Maybe something to the effect of Atticus telling them that they can watch the ending, but they need to have dinner first. Definitely include something with the interaction between Reverend Sykes and Jem, where Jem says, hey, I think we're going to win. And Reverend Sykes saying, hey, I've never seen a jury take the word of a black man over a white man before. So kind of like that foreshadowing that they might actually lose. And then definitely create a comic strip of, or not comic strip, a panel of the verdict coming back as guilty, and just how shocked that Jem would definitely be, how Atticus kind of just storms out of the courtroom after talking to Tom for a few seconds, and then kind of like the aftermath, where afterwards Atticus is given this expression of gratitude by the African Americans present. So like they all stand up as a show of gratitude and respect because he at least tried to do the right thing. Make sure for your comic you give at least 6, but you can do more if you need to. You can also change like their faces a little bit, so their expressions. So if you want like a sad expression or a shocked expression, or maybe even a horrified expression when they come back saying that the verdict was guilty, if you want to just do a shocked expression on Jem, that would definitely be appropriate because of the way he takes this. And you can also change their actions, whether you want them walking, talking, running, whatever. Just try to make it as accurate to your chapter as possible. If you end up doing chapter 22, of course, you're welcome to do that. Just make sure you at least have 6 panels. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to let me know. When you're actually on the comic that you're creating, there's a spot where I can I think I'm logged in as a student right now, but if I'm logged in as a teacher, I can comment on what you've done so far. So I can put a little comment to the side saying, hey, good job or whatever. I think I did that on Ethaniel. So yeah, to the side, I just wrote that he had done a good job with the internal-external conflict. If you are struggling to, capture everyone in the comic at once, don't worry about it. You can probably get away with just doing 2 people in each panel, or 1 person in a panel if need be. So I think chapter 22 has more going on, so it's probably the easier one, just because you can kind of do a panel for each event that happens. But you could do chapter 21 if you prefer. Let me know if you have any questions with that, and I will try to answer. You can message me on Google Classrooms, just making a comment, or you can email me. Either one I'll get pretty quickly. So let me know if you have any questions. I'll make sure to give you 3 credit for being here. If anyone's here who has not mentioned something, make sure to say something so I know to give you credit. Have fun with this assignment. There's no quiz for chapters 21 or 22. Instead, the comic will be your assessment. So let me know any problems that you bump into, and I will try to talk you through them. Have a great afternoon and weekend, and I'll talk to you all later.